I'll never forget the moment I saw my own startup idea, the one I'd poured 2 years of my life into, flashing across a pitch deck in a sleek San Francisco conference room. The kicker? It wasn't my name on the slide, it was my brother's. My own flesh and blood, the guy I'd trusted through everything, had stolen my $800,000 dream and was passing it off as his own to a room full of Silicon Valley investors. That betrayal hit like a freight train, but it wasn't the end of the story. It was just the spark that lit my fight to take back what was mine. My name's Lucas, and this is how I went from being stabbed in the back to crashing my brother's investor meeting with proof he'd lied, exposing him in a way he'll never forget. If you've ever been burned by someone you loved or had your work stolen, you're gonna want to hear this. I was 27 when it all started, living in Oakland, just across the bay from San Francisco's tech frenzy. I'd always been a hustler, side gigs in college, freelancing as a coder, always chasing the next big thing. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. My parents were teachers, scraping by in a modest house in Sacramento. Growing up, it was just me and my older brother, Dylan, 2 years my senior. Dylan was the golden boy, charming, confident, the kind of guy who could talk his way into anything. He was a marketing major, always landing internships, while I was the quiet one, tinkering with apps in my room, teaching myself Python when I was 15. We were close, though, or so I thought. We'd spend summers biking through our neighborhood, dreaming up businesses, a lemonade stand at 10, a sneaker resale hustle at 16. "We're gonna be legends, Luke," he'd say, his grin infectious. I believed him. After college, Dylan moved to San Francisco, chasing the startup scene, while I stayed in Oakland, coding for a mid-sized fintech company. The job was stable, but my heart wasn't in it. I wanted to build something of my own, something that could change the game. That's when the idea hit, a platform called ConnectSphere, a social networking app for freelancers to find gigs, collaborate, and build portfolios, all streamlined with AI to match skills to projects. It was niche but scalable, perfect for the gig economy boom. I'd seen freelancers like me struggle on clunky platforms like Upwork, and I knew I could do better. I started sketching wireframes at night, coding prototypes on weekends, pouring every spare hour into it. By early 2023, I had a working MVP, minimum viable product, with a clean interface and a killer algorithm. I was stoked, but I was also broke, burning through my savings to pay for servers and a freelance designer. Dylan was my biggest cheerleader, or so it seemed. He'd moved back to Oakland to reset after a string of failed startup gigs. His charm didn't always translate to execution. We'd hang out at my apartment, splitting beers, brainstorming ConnectSphere's future. "This is huge, Luke," he'd say, scrolling through my demo. "You need a pitch guy, though. Let me help." I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my brother, the guy who'd taught me how to throw a punch, who'd covered for me when I snuck out as a teen. I shared everything. My code, my business plan, even my investor deck, a 20-slide masterpiece I'd spent weeks perfecting. "We'll pitch it together," he promised. Carter Brothers, taking over Silicon Valley. I grinned, imagining us side by side, closing deals. That was my first mistake. The startup grind was brutal. I was working 80-hour weeks, coding by day, pitching by night. I'd bootstrapped ConnectSphere to a point where it had 500 beta users, freelancers I'd recruited through Reddit and LinkedIn, raving about the platform's ease. I'd even landed a meeting with a small VC firm, Blue Wave Capital, who saw high potential in the gig economy space. They valued ConnectSphere at $800,000 pre-seed, a number that made my head spin. But I needed funding to scale, better servers, a marketing push, a full-time team. I was close, so close, but the pressure was crushing. My apartment was a mess, my diet was instant noodles, and my girlfriend, Mia, was starting to worry. "You're killing yourself, Lucas," she'd say, her voice soft but firm. I'd kiss her and promise it'd pay off. I just needed one big break. Dylan was supposed to be part of that break. He'd been hyping up our pitch, saying he'd line up investor intros through his network. I didn't question it. Dylan always had a way of sounding like he knew everyone. But he started getting cagey. He'd dodge my calls, show up late to our meetings, or change the subject when I asked about his progress. "Just trust me, Luke," he'd say, flashing that grin. I chalked it up to his flaky side, the same Dylan who'd ghosted a job interview to find himself in Tahoe. But then I noticed other things. His new watch, a shiny Tag Heuer, his sudden trips to San Francisco, his vague talk about big opportunities. My gut started whispering, but I ignored it. He's my brother, I told myself. He wouldn't screw me over. The truth hit on a random Tuesday, like a punch you don't see coming. I was at a tech meetup in San Francisco, hoping to network with angel investors. The room was packed, coders, founders, VCs sipping overpriced coffee. I was chatting with a guy from a co-working space when he mentioned a hot new startup pitching at a closed-door event. It's called Freelance Flow, he said. Some guy's got a slick app for gig workers, AI-driven, super clean. They're meeting with Sequoia tomorrow. My stomach dropped. The name was different, but the description was mine, down to the AI matching and portfolio features. Who's pitching it? I asked, my voice tight. He shrugged. Some dude named Dylan Carter. My heart stopped. Dylan Carter. My brother. I drove home in a haze, Oakland's lights blurring through my windshield. I called Dylan, no answer. Texted him, "What's Freelance Flow?" He replied hours later, "Just a side thing, relax." Relax. I was shaking, my mind racing. I logged into my laptop and started digging. A quick Google search pulled up a landing page for Freelance Flow, same color scheme as Connect Sphere, same features, even phrases lifted from my pitch deck. I found a leaked pitch video on a startup forum, and there he was, Dylan, in a crisp suit, presenting my app to a room of suits, calling it his vision. I watched, numb, as he demoed my code, my wireframes, my dream, like he'd built it himself. The timestamp showed he'd been pitching for weeks, maybe months, while I was killing myself to keep Connect Sphere alive. I sat there, staring at the screen, my apartment dark except for the laptop's glow. The betrayal was a physical thing, like a weight crushing my chest. Dylan hadn't just stolen my idea. He'd taken my work, my time, my trust, and was selling it to the highest bidder. I thought of our summers, our plans, his promises, asterisk Carter Brothers, legends asterisk, and it all felt like a lie. Anger came next, hot and sharp, but under it was something worse, hurt. How could he do this? Was I just a stepping stone, a nerd he'd used to get ahead? Mia found me like that, hours later, still staring. "Lucas, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice pulling me back. I showed her the video, my hands shaking. "He stole it," I said, my voice breaking. "My own brother." She hugged me, but I barely felt it. My mind was already moving, piecing together what to do. I could have called him, screamed, demanded answers, but that wouldn't fix it. Dylan was pitching to Sequoia, one of the biggest VCs in the Valley, tomorrow. If he closed that deal, Connect Sphere was dead, and he'd walk away with millions while I got nothing. I wasn't going to let that happen. "I'm crashing that meeting," I told Mia, my voice low but firm. Her eyes widened. "Lucas, that's crazy. You need proof." She was right, but I had proof, every line of code, every email, every late-night note I'd shared with him. I just needed to pull it together, fast, and show up where he least expected me. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to stop Dylan, I was going to expose him, publicly, in front of the people he was trying to impress. It was risky, maybe insane, but I'd spent 2 years building Connect Sphere, and I wasn't letting my brother steal it without a fight. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying as I started pulling files, emails, anything that could prove the idea was mine. The clock was ticking, and I had less than 24 hours to make it happen. Dylan thought he'd outsmarted me, but he was about to learn what happens when you betray the one person who trusted you most. I spent that night hunched over my laptop, the glow of the screen burning my eyes, digging through every file, email, and text I'd ever shared with my brother, Dylan. My startup, Connect Sphere, my $800,000 dream to revolutionize freelancing with an AI-driven platform, was being pitched as his own under a fake name, Freelance Flow, to Silicon Valley's elite. The betrayal wasn't just a knife in my back, it was my own brother twisting it, smiling as he sold my work to Sequoia Capital in a meeting set for the next morning. I had less than 24 hours to pull together proof that he'd stolen it, or I'd lose everything I'd built. My name's Lucas, and this is the part of my story where I fight through exhaustion, doubt, and a ticking clock to build a case that'll expose Dylan's lies in front of the investors he's trying to con. Buckle up, because this gets intense. I was still in Oakland, my apartment a mess of empty coffee cups and post-it notes, the air thick with the kind of panic that makes your hands shake. Connect Sphere was my baby. 2 years of coding, pitching, and scraping by on instant noodles, with 500 beta users and a $800,000 valuation from Blue Wave Capital. Dylan had been my partner, or so I thought, until I found out he was pitching my app as his own, using my code, my designs, even my words. The pitch video I'd seen, Dylan in a suit, charming a room of VCs, played on loop in my head, his voice claiming my vision like he'd written a single line of code. I wanted to scream, to drive to his place and confront him, but that wouldn't stop him. I needed evidence, airtight and undeniable, and I needed it fast. I started with my laptop, pulling up every file related to ConnectSphere. I had everything. Thank God I was paranoid about backups. My GitHub repo showed every commit I'd made, time-stamped, with my initials all over the codebase. I screenshotted the earliest ones, from late 2022, when I'd first prototyped the AI matching algorithm. I dug through my Google Drive, finding wireframes I'd sketched in Figma, dated months before I'd even shown Dylan the demo. There were pitch decks, too, PDFs I'd sent him, watermarked with ConnectSphere Lucas Carter in the footer. I zipped it all into a folder labeled Proof, my heart racing as the file size grew. This was my lifeline, but it wasn't enough. I needed to show Dylan had access, that he'd taken it deliberately. That's where things got messy. I opened my email, searching for every thread I'd shared with Dylan. There were dozens, me sending him links to the repo, Dropbox folders with designs, even a Google Doc with my go-to-market strategy. Check this out, bro, I'd written, so naive it hurt. One email from last summer stood out. I'd given him admin access to my Trello board, where I tracked every feature and bug. Help me brainstorm, I'd said. He'd replied with a thumbs-up emoji, nothing else. I printed those emails, my printer wheezing as it spat out page after page, each one a brick in the wall I was building. But doubt crept in. Would this convince a room of investors? Dylan was a talker, a charmer. He'd spin a story, paint me as the jealous little brother. I needed something bulletproof. I called Mia, my girlfriend, at 2 a.m., my voice hoarse. I'm drowning here, I said, pacing my tiny living room. What if I can't prove it? She was half asleep but fierce. Lucas, you built this. Every line of code is yours. You've got the receipts, use them. She suggested checking my Slack history, where I'd shared early demos with Dylan. I'd forgotten about that. I logged in, scrolling through our private channel, and hit gold, screenshots of my MVP, sent to him a year ago, with me explaining the AI's logic. His reply: "This is dope, Luke. Let's pitch it soon. Let's." What a liar. I downloaded the chat logs, my hand steadier now, the evidence piling up like armor. The biggest challenge was time. Dylan's meeting with Sequoia was at 10 a.m. in San Francisco, less than 12 hours away. I didn't even know where it was, some high-rise in the financial district, probably, but the details were locked behind invite-only startup circles. I texted a buddy, Sam, a coder I'd met at a hackathon who worked at a co-working space in SF. Heard of a freelance flow pitch with Sequoia? I asked, trying to sound casual. He replied at 3 a.m., "Yeah, it's at the Embarcadero Center, 4th floor, 10 a.m. closed door, but I know the organizer." Why? I hesitated, then typed, "Personal stuff. Can you get me in?" Sam didn't ask questions, bless him, and promised to try, saying he'd text me by 7 a.m. I thanked him, my stomach in knots. Crashing a VC meeting wasn't just bold, it was reckless. If I screwed this up, I'd look like a lunatic, and Dylan might still walk away with the deal.
I kept digging, knowing I needed more than digital files. I remembered a notebook I'd used early on, scribbling ConnectSphere's core features during a caffeine-fueled all-nighter. I tore through my closet, finding it under a pile of old hoodies. Pages of messy handwriting, dated January 2023, with diagrams of the app's flow. I photographed every page, my phone's flash harsh in the dark. I also checked my beta user feedback, stored in a Google form, where freelancers praise features Dylan was now claiming as his. One user, a graphic designer named Priya, had emailed me directly. "This app's a game changer, Lucas. You're onto something big." I saved that, too. Her word a reminder of why I was fighting. The risks were piling up. If I showed up at Sequoia with half-baked proof, Dylan could turn it around, accused me of stealing his idea. He'd always been better at talking, spinning stories that made people believe him. I also worried about legal blowback. Could he sue me for defamation? Working with Mia grounded me, but the emotional toll was crushing. Every email I found, every file, was a reminder of Dylan's betrayal. I kept flashing back to our childhood, him teaching me to ride a bike, us laughing over dumb YouTube videos, promising to take over the world. Had it all been fake? Was he always this guy, waiting for a chance to screw me over? I wanted to hate him, but part of me still loved him, and that hurt worse than the anger. Mia caught me staring at a photo of us online. I also had to think about ConnectSphere's future. Even if I exposed Dylan, the startup was at a crossroads. My beta users were loyal, but I needed funding to scale, and Blue Wave's $800,000 valuation was my best shot. If Sequoia bought Dylan's pitch, they'd pour millions into freelance flow, crushing my app before it could grow. I've been so focused on stopping him that I hadn't planned what came next. Could I pitch ConnectSphere on the spot? Turn the tables? The idea was crazy, but it took root, giving me a spark of hope. I wasn't just fighting to expose a lie. I was fighting for my dream, for the freelancers who believed in me, for the kid who'd coded his first app at 15. As I parked near the Embarcadero Center, my phone buzzed, a text from Dylan. Heard you're freaking out. Chill, it's just business. Just business? My blood boiled, but I didn't reply. He thought he'd won. Thought I'd roll over like always. He was wrong. I grabbed my backpack, my evidence heavy on my shoulder, and walked toward the glass tower, the clock ticking down to 9:45 a.m. The meeting was minutes away, and I was ready to crash it, to lay out every email, every screenshot, every proof that ConnectSphere was mine. Dylan had underestimated me, but he was about to learn what happens when you steal from the one person who trusted you with everything.
The glass doors of the Embarcadero Center's fourth-floor conference room swung open, and there he was, my brother Dylan, in a tailored suit, pitching my startup idea, ConnectSphere, as his own to a room of Sequoia Capital's sharpest investors. He called it freelance flow, but every word, every slide, was mine, stolen from 2 years of my blood, sweat, and code. I'd spent the last 24 hours gathering evidence, emails, screenshots, notebooks, to prove he'd betrayed me, and now I was here, heart-pounding, ready to crash his meeting and expose his lies. My name's Lucas, and this is the end of my story, where I walk into that room, lay out the truth, and fight for what's mine. If you've ever had to stand up to someone who wronged you, this is where it all comes together, so let's dive in. I was in San Francisco, the city's morning buzz a stark contrast to the storm inside me. My backpack was heavy with evidence, 50 printed pages, a laptop with 200 files, a Canva deck Mia had helped me build to show ConnectSphere was mine. Sam, my coder buddy, had gotten me into this closed-door meeting, slipping me a guest badge with a nod as I entered the Embarcadero Center. The elevator ride felt like forever, my reflection in the mirrored walls showing a guy in a cheap suit, eyes burning with purpose. I wasn't just here to stop Dylan. I was here to save my startup, my dream, and maybe prove to myself I wasn't the pushover he thought I was. Have you ever walked into a moment where everything's on the line? That was me, stepping off that elevator, my pulse like a drum. The conference room was sleek, floor-to-ceiling windows, a long mahogany table, 10 investors in crisp shirts, their laptops open. Dylan was at the front, mid-pitch, his slide showing ConnectSphere's AI algorithm, the one I'd coded at 3 a.m. over months. Freelance Flow's matching system is unmatched, he said, his voice smooth, built from the ground up to revolutionize gig work. I stood at the door, unnoticed, my blood boiling. The investors nodded, one jotting notes, another asking, "What's your user base?" Dylan didn't miss a beat. 500 beta users, growing fast, he said, stealing my stats. I gripped my backpack, waiting for the right moment, my deck queued up on my laptop. I didn't have a plan for how to interrupt. Winging it was my only option. A woman in a blazer, probably the lead VC, raised her hand. "Dylan, your MVP looks polished. How long did development take?" He smiled, lying effortlessly. 18 months, start to finish. That was it, my cue. I stepped forward, my voice louder than I expected. "That's not true," I said, the room snapping to attention. Dylan's face froze, his eyes locking on mine, a mix of shock and fury. The investors turned, confused, some annoyed. "Who are you?" the blazer woman asked, her tone sharp. I took a breath, steadying myself. I'm Lucas Carter, Dylan's brother, and that's my startup he's pitching. It's called Connect Sphere, and I have proof he stole it. The room went silent, the kind of quiet that feels like a held breath. Dylan laughed, nervous but quick. Lucas, come on, this is embarrassing. Go home. I didn't flinch. Embarrassing, I said, pulling out my laptop. Let's talk about you stealing 2 years of my work. I opened my deck, connecting it to the projector with shaky hands, my first slide blazing, Connect Sphere, the truth. Visual cue, picture the screen lighting up, my name in bold, Dylan's smile fading, the investors leaning forward, intrigued. I started talking, fast but clear, laying out the timeline. I built Connect Sphere in 2022, I said, clicking to a GitHub screenshot. My commits dated January 2023. Here's my code, my wireframes, my beta user feedback, all before Dylan ever touched it. I flipped through slides, emails where I'd shared my Trello board, Slack messages with my MVP, photos of my notebook with hand-drawn features. The investors were riveted, one scribbling notes, another frowning at Dylan. I showed Priya's email, her praise for my app, and the pitch deck I'd sent Dylan, watermarked with my name. He took my files, I said, pointing at him, changed the name to Freelance Flow, and pitched it as his own. Dylan tried to interrupt, his voice rising. This is nonsense. Lucas is just jealous, trying to sabotage me. But I kept going, my voice steady. Jealous? I have 500 beta users who know me, not you. Want their emails. I tossed a printed list on the table, their feedback glowing. The blazer woman, who introduced herself as Karen, Sequoia's managing partner, raised a hand, silencing Dylan. Let him finish, she said, her eyes on me. I wrapped up with a final slide, a side-by-side of Connect Sphere's landing page and Freelance Flow's, identical designs, stolen word for word. This is my life's work, I said, my voice cracking. He's my brother, and he betrayed me. The room was electric, investors whispering, Dylan's face pale. Karen turned to him. Dylan, explain. He stammered, his charm crumbling. It's a misunderstanding, he said. We worked on it together. I laughed, bitter. Together? Name one line of code you wrote. He couldn't, his silence damning. Karen asked for my evidence, and I handed over my printed stack, 50 pages of emails, commits, notes. The investors passed them around, their murmurs growing. One, a gray-haired guy, looked at Dylan. You claimed sole ownership. This suggests otherwise. Dylan tried to pivot, saying he'd inspired the idea, but Karen cut him off. We don't fund disputes, she said. This meeting's over. She turned to me, her voice softer. Lucas, stay. We need to talk. Dylan grabbed his laptop, his eyes burning into mine, and stormed out, muttering, You'll regret this. I didn't care. I'd done it, exposed him in front of the people he'd tried to impress. Visual cue, zoom on Dylan's exit, his shoulders slumped, Lucas standing tall, the evidence scattered on the table. The aftermath was chaotic. Karen and 2 other VCs stayed, grilling me about Connect Sphere. Why didn't you pitch it yourself? One asked. I was honest. I was bootstrapping, barely surviving. I trusted Dylan to help, and he stabbed me in the back. They nodded, impressed by my evidence but cautious. Your app has potential, Karen said, but this drama's a red flag. Clean it up, and we'll talk. They kept my files, promising to verify, and gave me her card. I left the building, the Bay Bridge gleaming in the sun, my legs shaky but my heart soaring. I'd stopped Dylan, saved my startup, and maybe even caught Sequoia's eye. But I wasn't celebrating yet. There was too much to fix. Dylan ghosted me after that. No calls, no texts. I heard through Sam that he'd lost other investor meetings. His Freelance Flow pitch toxic after word spread. A startup blog picked up the story, Brother versus Brother, Startup Theft Drama, and it got 20,000 views, my evidence screenshots going viral in tech circles. Connect Sphere got a boost, with beta users rallying behind me, Priya tweeting, Lucas is the real deal. Hashtag Team Connect Sphere. But the win came at a cost. My relationship with Dylan was dead. Our parents, caught in the middle, begged me to work it out, but I couldn't. He stole my life, I told Mom, my voice raw. She cried, but I hung up, too hurt to bridge that gap. I refocused on Connect Sphere, using the buzz to land a new meeting with Blue Wave Capital, who'd valued it at $800,000 before. They offered $500,000 for a 20% stake, impressed by my guts at Sequoia. I took it, hiring a small team to scale the app, hitting 2,000 users by month's end. But the betrayal lingered, a shadow over every milestone. I started seeing a therapist, unpacking the trust I'd lost, not just in Dylan but in myself. You protected your work, she said, but you're more than your startup. It hit hard, forcing me to rethink what I was chasing, success or revenge. The legal side was messy but necessary. I hired a lawyer, Emma, to trademark Connect Sphere and file a cease and desist against Dylan's freelance flow. He didn't fight it, his brand was toast, but Emma warned me to lock down my IP. Version control, NDAs, backups, she said. Never trust blindly again. I followed her advice, securing my code on private servers, requiring NDAs for my team. It felt paranoid, but it was survival. The startup world was cutthroat, and I'd learned the hard way. Looking back, I learned 3 things. First, protect your work like it's your life. Timestamp everything, back it up, and don't share without agreements. Second, trust is earned, not owed, even with family. Dylan's charm blinded me, but my gut knew better. Third, you're stronger than betrayal. It hurts, but it can fuel you to fight harder, to build better. Connect Sphere's now at 5,000 users, with a $2 million valuation, and I'm pitching to new VCs, my deck cleaner, my vision sharper. Dylan's out there, starting over, but I don't wish him ill, I just don't need him anymore. If you're watching this and you've been burned, by a partner, a friend, or family, don't let it define you. Document your work, trust your instincts, and fight for what's yours. Ask yourself, what's worth more, your dream or your fear? Drop your story in the comments. I want to know how you fought back. My brother thought he could steal my future, but I took it back, line by line, and you can too. This is Lucas, signing off from Oakland, where the hustle never stops.